So Wayne, we're excited to have you back, man. You were here, I think, what was it, back in December? So
It's been a while. Yeah, enjoyed it.
yeah, it's been a little bit. That's pretty good. Maybe we need a routine, have you back once a quarter.
Hey, when I was, I'm also a minister, and when I would minister somewhere, they'd be like, "Hey, you should come back." And it was 3 years later, so I started setting it up. Like, yeah, we should. Let's schedule it.
Yeah,
Never leave a
you got
meeting
to put it
without
on the
scheduling the next
calendar.
meeting.
I don't think we'll wait 3 years though.
Thank you, thank you.
So last time, if any of you guys were on there, Wayne talked a lot about persuasion, and let's see, what was the name of the class? It was how people make subconscious decisions and how to win against the competition, and persuasion and the mind. I really liked it because it's not like a manipulative tactic, right? It's just understanding how people think and making
Right.
their decisions feel like they're their own, rather than, agreeing with you, they're agreeing with themselves. I really got a lot out of that class.
That's it.
The title of this one is Shifting Beliefs with the Prospects and Clients Through Storytelling. So I'm not very good at storytelling, but I've always really liked it. We've all heard, stories sell, and, facts tell, but stories sell. So I'm excited to have Wayne back. He's known as the coach's coach, which is kind of cool. On your website, or on Facebook anyway, Wayne, it says real results, client attraction and creation, more leads, more clients, and more cash flow. That's all obviously something we're all interested in, right?
That's right.
So Wayne, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you kind of
Okay.
add to any introduction you want and share your screen and rip into it.
Well, no, that's a great introduction. I appreciate it. I really do, Jeff, and thanks, Brandon, for connecting me. And I've been working with Brandon for a couple of months, actually longer than that now, several months now. But I am a coach. I love helping people grow their business, and so I really work in two realms. So if you're trying to figure me out, I'll give you the short story. And if one story is I'm a broker, and so I work inside of the real estate realm. I have a team, and I coach them out, and I coach outside of that team. Secondly, is I work with coaches, course creators, public speakers, to help them build up a business around that. So a little multifaceted, but it keeps the day going, makes it fun. And so I will also say what I just said there earlier is something you can all pick up. So I'm going to ask you to take notes quickly. We cannot cover storytelling in 30, 45 minutes. And Jeff, if I get like time, just wave your hand at me or something. We can't cover, hours and hours of storytelling in a short section, but I can give you some pointers and some ideas. I want you to leave here today going, I now can tell a better story, or I know the path to tell better stories. That's the key. And what I said earlier was, I'll give you the short story. How many have ever heard those people, those other people that talk and talk, and your eyes glaze over? My wife. And I'm listening, and I'm trying to listen, and with my wife, I've learned focus, 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 focus. But they tell those long stories, and then there's those who they really can say, hey, Brandon, here's the short story, and you're instantly drawn in, and you like that person. That's what I want to give you the ability to do, to be able to tell short stories that will help people go, you know what, I should come on board. I should affiliate with your company. Or, you know what, this repair request isn't that bad. Let's just go ahead and do it. Or when you're negotiating in any area, how do you negotiate with stories? And there's a power behind stories. So I'm going to jump into, I do have some slides. We'll go through them relatively quick. And I really believe the quicker we go through them, the more you'll pick up. And that's just a reality, because when stories work, they change everything. I told a story last time, Jeff, and I won't repeat it, but I told a story about how I met my wife. And I really believe most people that heard that story could be like, it's relatable. I connected with her through questions, but questions then became stories. So let me share my screen. And at any time, if anybody has questions, please jump in. Let me know. I'll be happy to answer. So storytelling for fun and profit. That's what I like to call it. Now, the reason I call it fun and profit is I love to talk. I love to share. Me and Brandon do a lot of coaching, but when we're talking, a lot of times it's me sharing a story. Then he'll share a story. And there's a sequence behind that. There's a reasoning behind that. Every evening when I put my daughters to bed, I have 4 daughters. Every evening they go, Dad, can you tell us a story? And we're going to talk about that. It's one of the greatest ways to become more influential is to tell stories to children, grandchildren, whatever it may be. So now here's another short story I think you'll find very interesting. Significant Objects. This was a literary experiment. Rob Walker, Joshua Glenn, you can Google this. Those who have seen it. If you haven't heard of this, it's one of the greatest story about stories I've ever seen. So these two gentlemen went and bought thrift store objects on eBay. Then they bought a bunch of them. Then they turned around and they had contributing writers write stories about them. Now, it wasn't this, hey, this little choir boy was in the Catholic whatever church, and they didn't make up fibs. They didn't lie about it. In fact, most of the stories didn't even mention the object, but the stories elicited feelings and emotions. This is what's interesting. They purchased on average $1.25 a piece and sold these again 200. There was 125 pieces for nearly $8,000. Purchased on eBay, wrote a story, repurposed, $8,000. You can make a living on that, guys. So what was the difference in a $2 kneeling man figurine here? He was purchased for $2. Somebody wrote a story about him, and they put him back on eBay and he got $56.50. One was a worthless knickknack. The other one was the object of a story. Think about a story in your life. We all have stories. I grew up in church, so I hear the stories about Adam and Eve and Jonah, the Good Samaritan. There's stories that you hear that have meaning. We know stories from watching movies. I'm going to share with you first the power of a story. Earlier, as Jeff said, when I came in and talked about the unconscious mind, everything I do, I want to affect somebody on an emotional level. Everything. So, in this case, though, the story had nothing to do with the product being sold. But they elicit emotional states, and everything we do is emotional. So what does it have to do with real estate? In building a big team? Absolutely everything. This, I believe, Jeff, is what you were talking about from the last easiest, most powerful way. Have someone purchase your product, list a property, or join your team is for them to recognize the decision was their own thoughts. If you come and say, here's why you should affiliate with us, and you gave me all the list, all the reasons, there's a time for that. Okay, great. I can work from home, rev share, whatever it may be, and I got all my list. But I feel like you're pushing it on me, then I go into sales resistance. But if I could lower the sales resistance, lower the cortisol that the brain's dripping when we get into that fight or flight, by bypassing the conscious factor, then the person can believe it's their idea and then they'll come on board with you. So, who remembers this movie? Wilson. Who remembers Castaway? Great movie. What a movie where a Wilson, I felt bad when the stupid little ball went out to the ocean, People cried because of this stupid ball, because they brought emotions and attached it unconsciously to a ball. $11.44 billion. Now, that was called product placement. You've seen product placement, guys. And once you see this, once you go through this class, you'll never be able to watch TV the same way. I count them now. My wife's like, just shut up and enjoy the show. And I'm like, look at that. They mentioned Duracell 3 times. They mentioned this. But product placement, American Idol, there's the Coca-Cola. Movies, they do it. Why? Because stories embed beliefs deep into the unconscious. So you got to be aware of what you allow in your mind and the mind of your family. So I'm gonna talk solely about real estate, except for one moment here in just a minute. I'm going to jump in. My minister's got to come out and I got to give a warning, because it's not spiritual or religious. It's just be careful what you're watching, because it does have an effect on you. Beliefs are embedded in products are sold through storytelling and the power of media. Like a Boss. The other day on Like a Boss, he's scrolling. The woman comes up and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm Zillowing. I've got to find more affordable home." We'll not take but a few shows where they say Zillowing, and Zillowing will be a term. Zillow knows what they're doing by paying for that. $1 Million Beach House, ADT. And they show them how ADT is going to work and everything's going to. I had a home listed on HGTV, one of my properties, and it's really funny. the actors or the people behind the house everything they had them to say. They had them record the same room, eight different scripts, so they could make sure what they were promoting throughout of it. Trendsetters on HGTV. ET, check this out. And I'm talking about storytelling in media because when you see the power of it, you'll recognize how important it is if you bring it in your own business. Hershey's spent $1 million, and that was way back then, guys, promoting ET in exchange for the rights to use, of course, what was it? Reese's Pieces. Do you know that was so powerful? When I first started dating my wife, they had a German Shepherd that would not let me out of the car. Her dad had to come out, remove the German Shepherd before I could go into the home. And I finally said, this is ridiculous. I'm going to earn that dog's trust. So I would stop and I would buy Reese's Pieces. And I would put one down and finally got where the dog would take it out of my hand and I could lay one down all the way to the door. The mistake I made was he ate the whole bag on the way to the door. The next day when I come out, I have scars on the back of my calf. I did not have enough Reese's Pieces left. Mr. Potato Head, Mrs. Potato Head, Potato, whatever you want to call it nowadays, became even more famous because of the Toy Story movie. Men in Black, Ray-Bans, Seinfeld, Junior Mints, and it goes on and on and on. When people see something, they will go and move towards that. So, how many of you believe that they spend literally billions of dollars in this and product placement because it works? Do you think they spend billions of dollars because there's no reason it doesn't work? It's a waste of time. They know what works and they do it over and over. So it comes into an unconscious belief. That's why people want the Tesla or the Mercedes or whatever it is, because unconsciously you've been sold this is the best. So I'm going to share with you how that's used in storytelling, good and bad. So a number of years ago, my son was about 13, 14 years old. He's 26 now, so we're going to go back about 12 years. He's at home. He's got on Nickelodeon, Nick Teen. Hey, Dad, I'm going to go ride a skateboard. Cool. He takes off. Me and my wife are sitting there. I don't know the show, but there's two girls on there that are locker. They're talking. Teenage, one of those teenage shows. I mean, the noise is way too loud and it's a lot of fake actors. The girl runs up to the other girl and says, Susan, I've got a story I got to tell you. And the other actor says, well, is it a real story or like a Bible story? No, it's a real story. And then they continued on. I hit pause on the DVR because I study this. I know this. And I told my wife, I said, did you catch that? No, I really wasn't paying attention. I said, well, probably a good million teenagers were. Let's rewind it. Is it a real story or like one of those Bible stories? No, it's a real story. What they did was just embed a belief that Bible stories are fake. This wasn't a Christian TV show or anything. So it upset me. And I started recognizing they do this all day long. More and more and more. And the reason they can make you begin to shift your beliefs is because it's done in a story. Your conscious filters are down. And if you're really into the movie or the show, it has a bigger effect. So when someone makes up their own mind, when your decision instead becomes their decision, you will earn their business. So we want to share our beliefs tucked inside a story or a series of stories. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm thinking about coming on board with you in your brokerage. Why should I? Well, I can lay out all of the reasons, all of our leads and all of our stock options and blah, blah, blah. Or I can say, that's interesting. Let me share a story with you. Let me share a story why I came on board. Oh, I see that you're leaving this industry. Let me share with you a story about somebody in a similar situation. And then you begin to share the story. Because people do not care about facts and figures and numbers. They want the emotion first. Stories are anchored in our mind. The Boy Who Cried Wolf, Three Little Pigs, Noah and the Ark, The Pilgrims on Thanksgiving. Dragos, the short-winged dragon who breathes smoke because he can't breathe fire. Who is Dragos? I'm sure none of you outside of the Sutton household have heard of Dragos, but he's a well-known name in our family. I made him up one night. Dad, will you tell us a story? Yeah, he's a short, fat, I know fat's not politically correct. It's a cartoon. It's imagination. He's a short, fat dragon with little teeny wings who can barely fly. He can't blow fire. He's the outcast. What do you think I do through these stories? I teach lessons, how they needed him. I use it as a fable, but I bring in other characters. I mean, Dragos has been to Disneyland. Dragos has been to Cancun. Dragos has been everywhere. But any of my daughters can go, hey, Dad, tell us about Dragos. And I leave an open loop. An open loop is something you see in movies and TVs. And I'm like, hey, when you get a little older, I'm going to tell you how Dragos got married. Oh, I've said that for 2 years. For 2 years, their mind is just an open loop. How did he get married? Who did he marry? See, storytelling doesn't stop with fables or history, though. You can use stories in your business. They don't have to be made up. They don't have to be Dragos. They can be real stories. They should be real stories. But when you use stories, you have the power to capture imagination. When you capture imagination, you capture focus. And storytelling is normal. Storytelling is so normal, they let their unconscious guard down. When you say, you must join our company, you need to list with me, you should make an offer on this home, cortisol starts dripping from the brain. People get into fight or flight. Oh no, am I making a bad decision? What should I do? But let me ask you this. How many of you have watched a movie and felt motivated? I'm going to talk to the men for a moment. How many of you watched Rocky IV and you wanted to find some big, funny talking Russian to just cross my path? I dare you. You know, there was no Russians anywhere around, but you found one. Karate Kid. And then here, as soon as I get out of the Karate Kid and realize I'm almost 50, here comes Cobra Kai. I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go again. You know, and you watch Cobra Kai, and my wife watched Braveheart and Patriot for the first time the other day. And it's like, you feel like you can take on the world. Or maybe you watch something that scares you. My wife can't watch horror movies because she can't sleep. You know, all that feeling that you could go fight the Russian, that feeling that you could, you know, take on the British Army, any of that, all it was chemicals dripping in the brain. And you placed yourself in there as Rocky. You place yourself in there. My daughters watch these princess shows. They place themselves as the princess. They got their princess dresses. They're dancing. They want to be called princess. They place themselves in there. So here's the emotional cocktail. How many love a good margarita? All right, this is the margarita cocktail. This is what you want people to move towards when you're telling a story. And I'm going to share with you as much as I can in this time how to get all of these working. Number one, you want dopamine. You want to give people a dopamine drip. Imagine if you could literally walk up to somebody, say a few words, and all of a sudden their brain started dripping endorphins, oxytocin, and dopamine. That's the three chemicals where people feel good. Now, I may have failed, but at the beginning I tried to make you laugh. I don't remember what I said, but a few of you chuckled. What happens when you laugh? You get relaxed. The person gets relaxed. They become more focused. They actually become more creative. And every laughter drops a little bit of endorphins to the bloodstream. You just feel better. Oxytocin makes you generous, trust, and ready to bond. One of the best ways to make oxytocin outside of physical touch. Physical touch is the number one way. Outside of physical touch is through stories. And then dopamine is when they get rewarded. They place themselves in there. They knocked out the Russian. They died on the battlefield, but their name is celebrated forever. Whatever, that dopamine rush. Now here's the damning cocktail. And I don't know if that's supposed to be an old-fashioned down there. It kind of looks like one, but if it is, I shouldn't call that damning. But cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, fight or flight. You need to sign with me. This is the way you have to do. This is what you should do. Anytime there's sales resistance, cortisol starts dripping. Adrenaline increases. They get intolerant irritable, uncreative, and they get critical. Here's how you can tell if somebody gets critical. Hey, Brandon, tell me again, Brandon, how RevShare works. Just explain to me again how the cap works. Anything like that, you can now know, okay, they've got into critical mode. It means cortisol is dripping. That means the fight or flight, they may jump on board or they may run. That's a great question. That's a great question. So you're asking about the RevShare. Let me share a short story with you. And then you have a story about what RevShare did for somebody. The story of how RevShare, me and Brandon have talked about this, will help somebody that couldn't afford braces for their child. The story of how RevShare. So I'll share with you guys a really, really quick story. A number of years ago, it was not in real estate, but it was in a network marketing company. My father got sick and he came to live with me. And he said, and I knew I was in the insurance business, and I knew I needed to be out doing insurance, but I also knew he was dying and he was sick, and I needed to be with him. And I couldn't do both fully. So I spent 80%, 90% of my time with him. I neglected my insurance business. I neglected my network marketing business. But you guess what happened? The insurance business dwindled, but the network marketing continued to grow and grow and grow. And I'd open up the mailbox, didn't have direct deposit then, opened up the mailbox and there was the check. And I could feel I can take care of my dad. Next month, there was another check. That's what RevShare did for me. So it's a simple story, true story, but it makes people realize, wow, this matters. So let me give you some storytelling basics. On this call, I more wanted to give you why you need to tell stories, give you some ideas on how you can do it, and then we're going to move from there. Number one, stories, they don't set up sales resistance. They're easily remembered. Some of you will forget everything I said today, but you'll remember Dragos, the silly little dragon. Or maybe you'll remember me pulling that check out of the mailbox. Stories get people to act. They motivate people. We're programmed. We're already programmed to listen to stories. Stories speak to the prospect's unconscious mind when done properly, and they're fun to listen to. People love to hear stories of people that achieve things, people that lose things. It doesn't matter. We just love to hear stories. So here's what you need to do. You need to identify the story of your brokerage. Not just the history. History is important, but what's the story behind that history? What's the story why you joined? This is so important. When people sit in front of me and go, hey, I really love this Wayne, but I'm also interviewing Keller Williams, Caldwell Banker, blah, 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 blah. Great. May I share a quick story with you? And every time I ask for permission, sure. I saw those other companies too. I heard all the promises. Can I share with you why I decided this is home? I'd love to hear that. Boom. They place themselves in you, and your reasons become their reasons. Identify the story of a home. We're not going to look at a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 3,000 square foot home. We're going to go show a home in Tarrant Woods. Do you know about this community? We're going to show a home in Congleton Farms. Do you know why it's called Congleton Farms? Oh, wow. It's built on Lieutenant Congleton Drive. There was 2 brothers that owned the land. They had a horse farm here for many, many years. In fact, schools would come here, and this happened, blah, blah, blah. And you tell a whole story about it. Suddenly has an emotional attachment to the land. You want to paint a picture for the buyer. You want to paint a picture. This is basic sales, but when you want to paint a picture of how it's going to look when the kids come home, how is it going to look when you're on the back porch and enjoying? They will evoke emotion, and you sometimes want to throw rocks at the enemy. And here's one way of doing that. Hey, I'm not going to say anything bad about Keller Williams. I'm not going to throw rocks at Keller Williams. But when I began, I will say this, however, when I came into the business, I sat down with an agent over at Keller Williams, and this is what they told me. Now, I just told you, I'm not going to throw rocks, Jeff. And when you hear that, you see yourself throwing rocks. It's called an embedded command. It means you give a statement, you pause, and then you give a command. Listen, one thing I don't want to ever do is throw rocks at Keller Williams, Jeff. An image in your mind, because we just did 20 stories, is you see yourself throwing rocks at them. You got to be careful with that, because we always wanted positive and, all that fun stuff. Now, storytelling is great. You're talking to a client, but what about videos? What about emails? What about social media? Could you, and I mentioned Congleton Farms, but if you're going to do a video about a neighborhood, is it better to say, hey, Wayne Sutton here, we're at Congleton Farms, look at this beautiful ranch, blah, 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 got a community pool, or, hey, Wayne Sutton here at Congleton Farms, do you know the story behind this real estate here in Wilmington, North Carolina? Congleton Farms actually was blah, 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 whatever. All of a sudden, there's a story that people want to hear in that video, in the email, on social media, that nobody else brought them. You're evoking positive emotions and linking them to you. That's your whole job. So, here's a framework for a story. A setting, time and place. The Good Samaritan. What was the time? Back in the day. Where was the place? On a road. What happened? What was the complication here? He was robbed, beaten, thrown into a ditch. This Jewish guy. What was the resolution? The Samaritan came and helped them out. How do you set all that up, though? One of the easiest ways of saying, hey, Brandon, that reminds me of a time when. That reminds me of a time when is a perfect entry, because the person automatically goes, oh, wow, this is going to be a story. If it's a story, it's safe. I can lower my resistance. That reminds me of a time when. Very powerful. And this last one I have in red for a reason. Friendship can only occur when you've shared your personal stories. How many of you have friends? At least one or two. All right, great. Ones who didn't raise your hand, God bless you. But you have friends. How many know something about your friends? I mean, you know their favorite place to eat, what they hate, their love, their good, their bad. You know their stories. Somebody that you don't know anything about them, here's the key. If you don't know anything about somebody, they can make you mad, but they can't hurt your feelings. It's when you know people and you know their stories. One of the best ways to get somebody to tell you their story, if I really wanted to befriend Jeff and really get to know Jeff and influence Jeff, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell Jeff one of my stories first. And Jeff's going to feel comfortable, and then Jeff opens up. That's how you build a legitimate friendship. So, company story. You need to elicit great feelings and trust about your company. So when I'm recruiting someone, I'm talking a lot about recruiting guys, but that's what I do. So, hey, when I'm recruiting someone, I tell them, hey, I want to share with you why our company. And I would put my company name in there. And I talk to them a story, not only why I came on board, but other stories of other people. Now, maybe you have a product. What is your product? Product stories are good. Product could be your listing presentation, your listing system. Your product could be your rev share, whatever it is, something that you have a story around results, not facts and figures, stories. And then you. 90% of the people I recruit, I'll say, why did you come on board? And I listen. What was it that made you realize this is a great decision? And most of them say, Wayne, I just really felt comfortable with you and the team. I really felt like this was going to be good. I felt good about you, Wayne, is what I hear more than not. That's what you want. So you want them to like you. You want to build authority. And you want to have a story. Now, for time's sake, I can't get into all the stories, but I have stories for every objection that comes up. So I would ask you, maybe write down 3 objections that you get. Whether they don't want to list with you, they don't want to sign a buyer agency agreement, they don't want to come on board in your team. What's three objections? If somebody says, hey, this sounds really great, come on board, But I want to talk to my husband. I want to talk to my wife. I mean, you got to respect that, but you also a lot of times can overcome that. You can overcome that by saying, truly get it. Me and my wife, that reminds me of a time when I made a decision without my wife. Whatever that story is, and you just go into, that reminds me. That's it. Now, here's a quick overview. Take a picture of this. How do I intro into a story, Wayne? How do I get a story started? When I was a child, may not really work as much in real estate, but when I was a child, it was a great storytelling because everyone was a child. Kind of got some common ground there. A number of years ago, that could be 1 year ago, 30 years ago. The short story is, now I like using that one a lot because people, they can, oh wow, I'm gonna hear a story, I can be safe, and it's not gonna take a lot of my time. The short story. That reminds me of when, and you go from there. Have you heard about, I'm just curious, have you heard about RevShare? Whatever they say, yes or no, then you just go right into a story. What do you know about our brokerage? Curious, what do you know about it? They're going to tell you what they know, and they're probably going to tell it in the form of a story. And then you can begin to introduce your story as well. So, if I had to give advice for this, I want to give an overview really quick, recap. Stories lower resistance. They get people to hear you, and then you can embed in your belief systems and share with people. I had someone that had, I won't get into the details, I don't know the group that well, but I had somebody have a very strong political belief system that I worked side by side with. And they were very strong in it, very, very, very vocal about it. And they were a leader. They led a lot of people to follow them. And I totally disagreed. So what I did was respected them, started telling stories. I waited. I didn't automatically come back. I had time. I worked beside them 50 hours a week. Oh, wow. A number of years ago, Susan, let me share with you what happened. Well, that reminds me about this. And I would go into storytelling because story would paint an image. And at the end, not only were they totally, their belief system changed, they're a strong evangelist now for the other side. Just leave it at that. So storytelling works. How do you become better at telling stories? That's one of the things I promised. Simple as this. Start noticing stories. I'll personally, if I have free time, I'll go to YouTube and I'll pull up TEDx. Why do I pull up TEDx talks? Number one, it's not that easy to get on. Not everybody can get on, do a TEDx talk. They're all under 20 minutes, 17, 18 minutes. I can take time to hear that. And they are coming with a purpose. Most of them do not come out and go, hey, my name is Wayne Sutton. I'm here to share with you. No, they come right into the middle of the story. It was a dark and stormy night. And they go right into it. And that's one of the ways is get into TEDx, start listening. There's a couple of books, Talk Like TED, a couple other ones that will help you. Those who are interested, there's a great book. In fact, his name is Tom Schrader, and it's How to Use Stories for Network Marketing. He's got a couple of them, like a 2-minute presentation, how to use stories in your network marketing presentation. Tom's a great friend of mine. I've learned a lot from him. So I'll be happy to get that list over to you as well. Any other questions or anything that I want to mention? In fact, let me do this. Practice storytelling with family, friends, children, and grandchildren. Just practice telling stories. Here's how you practice it. Take any fact or figure you have about your company and go, what's the story behind that? What's the story behind each and every one? Become a student of storytelling. Pick up some fiction books. I'm not a fiction reader. I like nonfiction, but pick it up, listen to it, become that. We do have a course. It is final stages. We're still editing, where it is storytelling for fun and profit. If you want to go grab a hold of that, it is no charge. There's none at all. It literally is going to take everything from how to start a story and so much more. And I'll cover that in a second. If you want to reach out to me, it is Discover Real Results. But storytelling for fun and profit, this course I could easily sell, and I'm not. I'm giving it away because I love this. Here's what's going to be in the course: nested loops. I talked about an open loop when Dragos is going to get married years from now. But a nested loop is how to tell a story within a story. Transition and techniques to transition from facts and figures into storytelling. Blurred realities. This is where somebody has a reality they're strong and staunch on. How do you bring doubt and confusion into their own reality? Embedded commands. Spatial anchors. Now, spatial anchors is how you tell a story with gestures and with your body language, so people grab a hold of the story and believe it. Metaphors and belief system, and much, much more. So the course is about 12 hours worth of data that we've compiled. It's not a quick one afternoon, but it'll really, really change your life. So if you want it, would love to be able to get that to you. And I want to say thank you, Jeff. And I don't want to, how much time I have, but I'll be open up to any questions on this.
Yeah, we're good on time, Wayne. I appreciate that, man. This is really good stuff. Anybody have any comments or questions? One thing I noticed, and I made some notes here, Wayne, is you got to be purposeful about this stuff, right? It's hard to just throw in a story on a whim, but if you know that this story is going to make my point for me in a better manner, and I don't really pre-think things like that. And to be prepared to have that conversation and know, like, wrote down, have a story for each objection. That doesn't matter if it's a seller or a buyer or whatever. I had another client that was in that same situation. So I'm going to actually create those and practice that like you suggested.
That's huge. If you'll create those and just make it part of your normal repertoire, I have several in my head that I tell people. In fact, I'll give you an example of one, if that's okay. When someone says, hey, why should I come on board and work with you, Wayne, in the coaching or whatever? Then one of the questions, I start with a question and then I go into a story. That's a great way to transition. So the question is, Jeff, have you ever met someone and you don't know why really, but you can't really put your finger on it. You just know this is the right person. I want to work with this person. It just felt right. And when they go, yes, or whatever it may be, and I say, well, about 2 years ago, I'd walked away from a corporate job. I went fully independent as a real estate agent and a broker, and I started doing some coaching. But a job opportunity came up to work with somebody. And I was on the 3rd floor of my home. I was actually sitting right here where I'm sitting now. And I hung up the phone and I walked down the stairs. And all the way down those stairs, those creaky stairs, I thought, what is my wife going to say? And she was cooking tacos. I remember that because she'd made me a margarita. So I'm adding little inserts in there that they remember. And I said, hey, remember all of those years I bitched and moaned and whined about working somewhere else and I was going to finally get free? She was like, yeah. I said, well, I just took a job. And she said, why would you do that? Why would you do that after all of that? I said, because, and Jeff, have you ever just worked with somebody and you knew that was the right person? And I told her, I said, I can't place my finger on it. But deep inside, I know this is the next right step. And she said, go for it. And that's what I'm going to ask you today. I'm going to ask you to go for it. Now, how many of you felt something there? Or how many are you still stuck on the taco and margaritas? I mean, you felt something different than, oh, here's why, because we have this and this and this and this. It was a story. You've never met my wife. You've never walked down my creaky stairs. But you heard that. You saw the 3-story home. All of those little details. And then it just felt right to go for it. That's why you want to have a story for every objection. and it can change. So, any other questions?
How long do you keep your stories for? Like, do you try to target like 30 seconds, or what's their attention span typically?
Perfect question. I thought that was in the notes, and it was not. 1 to 3 minutes, and it can be 30 seconds. But I really like a 1 to 3 minute story. What a story I just told probably was a minute and a half or something like that. And then I want to tell a story. I want to evoke that emotion. I want to anchor it to an action. And then I want to jump into normal talk. And you want to keep it conversational. That's the big thing. Conversational. And one of the great ways, again, I said this earlier, to get a story received is to ask them about their story. I saw that you've come inside. Hey, you just signed up to be a real estate agent. Oh, wow. Tell me the story behind. And I literally say the words, tell me the story behind that. No, tell me why. Tell me the story behind that. Because when they told their story, you can tell your story. It's just reciprocity, human nature. And then, of course, but that was a great question, Zane. 1 to 3 minutes is exactly how I would keep it. So,
Wayne, can I share the video that I sent to you this morning or last night?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
The TikTok story. So Wayne and I have been messing around with TikTok lately, and I actually went to met with a guy here in town who I guess is an influencer. He has like 70,000 followers or whatever. So I went and started talking with him. So I follow him. He gave me some ideas, but 2 of his last 3 posts that I've seen, one of them was, hey, 2020 has been the best year for me. Why? And he just does this. They're all 15 seconds, and he just does this, and it like lays down like, what did he start a new job? He did this, he did that, all these different accomplishments that he had. And then one he did last night, it was kind of a recruiting pitch, but it was like, hey, I've already got this many people have just joined me. Boom, boom, boom. And it was 6 people. And this has been from December. And he works for, I think, Berkshire Hathaway. But he just did that in 15 seconds. In the comments, there was like 40 people that were like, hey, we need to talk. Hey, we need to talk. There was 0 about what commission split he offered, what his team did. He just went and he's been telling these 15-second stories for so long. And he had that one post got 40, there's at least 40 people. I haven't even checked it today, but it was a lot just based on a story.
Yeah, and what Brandon just said, 15 seconds, but it's a multitude of those 15 seconds. But it's the 15 seconds. A story sells every time. Asking people how they made a decision, why this is important to you. And now, once you fully understand unconscious languaging, you can add a lot to the stories. You can add embedded commands, double binds, loops, all the fun stuff that make it fun. But you don't want to add that until you have the storytelling process down. Nested loops, I've got to share this story with you really quick. If you've ever seen, nested loops are used all the time against us, for us, whatever you want to share. A nested loop is when a story starts, and by the way, and then they drop in another story. And then a few minutes later, they drop in a third story. See it in TV. But they didn't finish the other 2 stories. So the mind's up here going, what happened? What happened to Jane? What happened to Susan? And then you close the stories in reverse. See story 1, story 2, story 3. Then you close story 2 and you close story 1 with your call to action at the end. And it is truly, I tell you who uses a lot of hypnotherapists will use it in their inductions. A lot of people use it, timeline therapy, etc., because it keeps the mind focused for you to go in and share what you need them to hear. And then you close it up. And it's basically all the loops have been closed. So what you said, they believe. And so politicians that are properly trained, most are not. You'll see this. Attorneys will use this. There's a couple of attorneys that I've called out and said, hey, I know what you're doing here. So it's really fun. But it is very, very powerful. But the most important thing is stories make you feel like a real person, and people want to deal with real people, period. So practice on your children, grandchildren, and you'll do great.
Zane, I got a question for you. Just you guys have met Zane maybe a time or two, but he is the newest student body president of Idaho State University. So my question for you, Zane, is in your campaigning, did you tell stories?
Yeah, we actually used a lot of stories. The biggest story we tied into was what campus used to be like, obviously prior to COVID, and then also what it used to be back like in the 80s. ISU used to be kind of like a party school. There was a lot of culture. And now with COVID, it's kind of died. And so by just talking about and bringing that emotion in from the 80s, we were able to kind of reestablish that connection and made students want to take initiative and take action.
I love that, how you tied party school and culture together. It's very important. That's awesome.
You just have fun in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any input on here? Wayne, we could go on all day. This is all really, really good stuff. It shows me that I got some homework to do. I got some prep work to do, and that, you know, you're not going to get good at something unless you start. So yeah, this has given me some really good tactical.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. And like I said, the course is, and you know, I thought the course was going to be done before this. It's not. But the course, I really want to dive deep. So we're going to go into different storytelling principles, and then we're breaking it up because some people just want to be able to tell stories, just to build conversation, build that charisma, and just have people like you. That's great. Other people want to be able to shift belief systems. This is more on the political side, or more on the, I have a movement and I need to shift the way people see things. And then there's just persuasion and sales and everything else. If you've ever heard people will not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel, that is storytelling also. Because I've met a lot, they probably don't remember some of the stories I told, but if I can get them to feel good and feel happy and move in a good direction. So that's key. The key is, remember, when I was young, that reminds me, just look for an entry point, and transitioning is, let me share a short story, or ask them, can I share a short story with you? And most people say, sure. They'd love to hear stories. So
What's
another
up?
big
Sorry.
takeaway I had there, Wayne, was that stories are safe and it lowers resistance. I'm like a bullet point kind of guy. I really don't care to listen to the stories. I just want, you know, give me the facts, get to the point. I don't need the story. And so I tend not to communicate that way, because that's the way I am. And what I'm learning is I need to communicate with people the way they are, not the way I am.
And what you just said, Jeff's really good. So if you're trying to persuade Jeff, somebody says, just give me the points, give me the facts, give me the figures. Great. Give them what they're looking for is the analytical mind. So give them a little bit of it. And then when they go, okay, and they're receiving it, then share the story. So start with match them, mirror where they're at. Hey, Jeff, let me share with you, boom, 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 boom. And about the fourth or fifth bullet point down, I'm going to go, and the interesting part about this bullet point, our founder, 7 years ago, and I'm going to find a way to enter into a story. So meet them where they're at, and then bring the story into it, and get them to lower that resistance.
Hey, Brandon, I cut you off there. Jump back in.
Well, I was just going to ask, what are the qualifications to become a storyteller?
What are the qualifications? You can speak and you can listen. I think the biggest thing there behind it, really, though, Brandon, is be able to listen as much as you speak, because if you tell a story they don't care about, so what? You've got a really active listening is 99% of this game. So instead of, and another great question, Brandon, because if somebody says, hey, they say something and you're thinking, oh, I got a story for that. Wayne said, I need a story. I got a story. And you start blah, 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 vomiting up the story. They may not be ready for it yet. So I still go into deeper connecting questions. What's interesting you said that. Share with me more about that. When people say, Wayne, what's your commission split? I don't go right into a story. I want to find out why that's important to them. Is that really important? Was that just something they thought they should ask? So I'm going to do more transition and deeper probing questions. And then if I realize I'm going to start them at 70% and somebody else will start them at 80%. Then I've got a 10% gap to cover. How do I cover that? 10% is real money. I got to cover it with the story. I got to build value outside of the money. I got to build value in something else. But what qualifies is being able to listen first and then share stories. And guys, the biggest thing about storytelling is being able to see when somebody's engaged. That's why I recommend one-on-one first. One-on-one first. Look for that engagement. I've also, it wasn't on your call, Jeff, but I did one maybe 6-7 months ago. And this is what I saw, okay? This was their number one real estate agent. Zero interest, did not want to hear what I had to say. And it was messing me up. So I saw his name down there on the screen. And I'll pick on Zane, even though Zane's been good. I've been like, and hey, Zane, this reminds me of an agent in South Carolina. In fact, they had the same name. They're out of is it Goose Creek near Charleston, I believe it is. I believe it is. I'm bringing some believability in it. And they reminded me of you in one area. He went from this to this. And I don't even remember what I said, and I went into my story. So noticing where people are at and really noticing how, if you can compliment, it's another great way to start a story. So some of you don't have your camera on, so I can't look at you. Zane, here's how I would compliment you though. I'd be like, hey man, that's really great on what you're doing there with the school. And do you know, I just had, maybe my wife had twin 4 years ago, and one of them was named Zane. Now, it wasn't the boy I thought it was going to be, so her now is named Stella. But if it was a boy, it was going to be Jonathan Zane, and which is really cool. Tell me, how did you come up with your name? How did your parents come up with that? And whatever. Where did your name come from? Just a short story that relates. Kathy, oh my goodness, you remind me. And there's something about you, I don't know what it is. You remind me. Caldwell Banker agent that came in my door one day and said, I'm done with them. I'm either signing up with you or Keller Williams. And from blah, 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 whatever it was, but you did remind me of it. Just looking. Eric, then I would give a compliment on something. I see something. Tell me the story. If you can compliment or they remind you, if not, ask them about a story. Ask them tell me the story behind that. Hey, Jeff, the back of your wall looks just like Brandon's wall, but his is black and yours is white. Tell me the story behind it. Yeah, I don't know, but you want to bring up things that are in the natural realm. Tell me the story behind that. When I was dating, oh my gosh, I didn't have any game. All I knew how to say was, that's an interesting tattoo. What's the story? That's a neat necklace. Tell me the story behind that. People love to talk about themselves. Give them the opportunities. So.
Go ahead.
Hey, Wayne, I got a question for you. So just going back to the stories, do you have starting out, it seems like it could be super overwhelming thinking, okay, a story for this, story for that. But do you have just like a format or something to pick, okay, I'm going to come up with 5 different topics or 5 different stories for these 5 topics or something? Or is there some sort of formula for that?
Yeah, the biggest formula is, let me share with you my screen again really quick.
Nice.
A story, not 5 stories. One story for your company, when that says product here, it could be your business model, whatever it may be, and then you. One story, because what you're going to do, the more you talk, you can realize what stories connect with people. It's almost like a comedian. They realize really quick, this joke didn't work in San Francisco, it may not work here, and they just drop it. So you're going to tell your story, and you're going to notice what stories stick, what stories don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then you just pick that story, you get really good at telling that one story.
Get really good at that, and the more you tell a story, there's something about that creative process, the more you'll start flowing into other stories. But your company, your product, and then finally, what objections are you having?
Gotcha.
One of the stories I have, I get is, Wayne, that sounds great and all, but I really don't want to go back to Caldwell Banker and quit. Oh, I don't want to face my broker over there is going to give me such, oh my goodness, And so I have a story about that. I have a story about a lady named Cheryl. And you know what? You remind me so much of Cheryl. She's actually about a $15 million producer with us now. But she said almost exactly what you said. So here's what we did. And it's just a short story of how we filled out affiliation paperwork, sent an email, it was done. So we just made it really easy, but I had to overcome it with the story instead of saying, oh, we can just do this. Because in their mind, if somebody else can do it, I can do it too. And it wasn't just somebody did it. It's a $15 million per year producer that happens to sit 2 desks over from me, and I'll point over to her. So yeah, but to answer your question, one story on those and one story on every objection, and just continue practicing that.
Sweet. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome, guys. Anybody else got any questions? If not, I have 2 listing presentations. Let me share with you how I got those. They were stories. They were stories. I called homeowners. How many? I don't want to get into the long story, but I don't just call and say, hey, are you looking to sell your property? Hey, the market's hot and we need properties. No. I have Kent and Claudia out of Wallace. And I have a lady named Loretta out of Bergen County, New Jersey. Not even sure where that's at. And this is how I'm talking. But anyway, both of them are looking properties, and we just don't have exactly what they're looking for. So I'm doing what most agents won't do. I'm just picking up the phone and calling you. Are you thinking about selling? Tommy Cooper said, I'm putting in floors now. Then I was going to find me an agent. So I'm dropping him off a listing packet. No, Wayne, I moved to Florida. I've got 7 properties. Do you think I could get some profit out of them now? I'm renting them. Because the story, I didn't sound like every other agent. So, Jeff,
I love it. Hey, thanks so much, Wayne. Great job, great information. Thanks for coming, guys. We did record this, and Wayne, if you haven't already, maybe you could share your slide deck with us too. I've got a lot of pictures on my phone, but
I will share. Absolutely, we'll do it.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, guys. If you don't have anything else, this is your last opportunity. But thank you so much, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Really enjoyed it.
All right, see you guys.